Welcome to Nala's Tales, the dog podcast to help you understand and enrich your dog's life. We'll talk about enrichment, tips for summer, picking a pet sitter or walker, and of course all the stories and tricks I've learned while training Nala, my furry companion. Whether you're a new dog parent or you've had your furry friend for years, if you need help understanding your canine companion, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host Tara. That was Nala, and this is Nala's Tales. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nala's Tales, the podcast. Today we're talking about how to find the best dog care for you and your furry friend. Whether you're going away on vacation or just need someone to walk your dog during the day, there are a lot of different options available. In this episode, we'll discuss the different types of dog care, the pros, the cons of each, and how to find the right one for you. So I've broken this down, so we're going to talk about each one. So we're going to talk about dog walkers, doggy daycares, home boarders, pet sitters, and kennels. We'll discuss what each one does and the pros and cons of each, and then towards the end, so I'm not repeating myself. And we'll also then go over concerns you should be looking at, types of questions you should be asking, and I will also link into the description the blog that I've also done that's also about this topic. And on the bottom of the blog, what you'll see is a printout of the types of questions you can ask each service. So it's a 10-page document, but you don't have to print out all 10 pages. What you can do instead is just print out the bit that applies to you, whether that be the questions for dog walkers, the questions for doggy day. Dog walkers. Dog walkers are a great option for people who need someone to walk their dog during the day. They can come to your home and take your dog for a walk around the block, or they can take your dog to a park or a dog-friendly area if you've got them nearby. Dog walkers are typically more affordable than other types of dog care, and they're a great way to give your dog some exercise and fresh air. As you can see, Nala's really wet. If you're watching this on YouTube, we've just been walking around in the farm area around near our house. I tend to do more of a woodland, natural kind of walk in the surrounding areas where we're at, but we're quite rural. If you live in a city environment, that might not be an option for your dog walkers. That's something also to consider when you're looking at a dog walker, the kind of walks that they offer. Dog walkers are a great option for dogs who need regular exercise and mental stimulation while you're at work. They offer a one-to-one attention and keep your dogs in a familiar environment. However, some dogs may not walk well with a stranger or may require a more extensive care. So, for example, I only offer one-to-one bespoke walks, so I only walk one dog at a time or one household at a time. Might be a better way of putting it, because there is the occasional time where I've got clients who've got more than one dog, so obviously I walk all their dogs from their household. Extensive care, like for example, would be like if you've got a dog who's got, like say, a lot of my clients are reactive in that sense, so a reactive dog wouldn't be good in a group walk. That's things to consider when you're looking for a dog walker. Do they offer a one-to-one walk, or is it only a group walk, because your dog might not do well in a group-to-group walk. So the pros of a dog walker can be that your dog gets one-to-one attention, it's going to get regular exercise, and it's the most affordable option for people. And the cons, however, is there's limited time spent with your dog. There's also limited spaces. So I see it where someone dog walkers only walk a group of say 5 dogs. There is actually places where I live where you're limited in certain parts of the area with dogs to only walk 2 to 3 per one person. So that also can limit the dogs in your area if the council's got a limit on how many dogs can be walked by a person at a time. And it's not ideal for extensive care periods, so it's not the best option if you're going to be away for a long period of time. Doggy daycare is a great option for dogs who love to socialise. Doggy daycares provide a safe and supervised environment where dogs can play with other dogs all day long. They're a great way for dogs to get their energy out and make new furry friends. Doggy daycares can be expensive, but it's a great option for dogs who need a lot of exercise and socialisation. Doggy daycares are fantastic for social dogs who thrive on interactions with other canines. It can also help prevent separation anxiety and destructive behaviours in dogs left home alone. However, it may not be suitable for dogs who don't enjoy being around other pups, and some daycares may have limited hours of operation. Also, another thing to consider when you're looking at a doggy daycare is whether or not they take your dog if it's neutered. So there is ones in my area where they will not take a female dog if she hasn't been neutered. So that's something you should consider. It's enlisted on the questions to ask your daycare. Benefits of a doggy daycare is obviously you've got socialisation opportunities. There's lots of simulation and exercise, and it can help to reduce separation anxiety because they're with other people and with other dogs. Disadvantages, obviously, of daycares is obviously there's the risk of potential conflicts for other dogs. There's also a risk of like doggy daycares. You run the risk of obviously any airborne viruses within dogs being obviously catching. It's a bit like a cold. If you imagine a cold with kids when they go to school, pass it around to everybody in the nursery. It's a bit like that. Potential for conflicts with other dogs may not offer personalised attention. So another thing to consider when you're doing that is obviously dog to person ratio in daycares, because what will happen is depending on how many people there is to manage each dog, that they're not going to get an overall attention as you would do if you were going to have a one-to-one walk, for example. Pet sitters. So pet sitters are a great option for people who need someone to take care of their dog while they're away. Pet sitters can come to your home and feed, walk and play with your dog, or they even just stay in your home overnight. Pet sitters can be more expensive than dog walkers, but they provide a more personalised level of care. Pet sitters offers personalisation care and attention to your dog, reducing stress by keeping them in their comfortable, familiar surroundings. Additionally, having a pet sitter can provide additional security for your home while you're away. On the downside, some dogs may take time to adjust to a new person in their space, and pet sitters can be a more expensive option. So with this one, for example, pet sitters are a bit like a babysitter. They charge an hourly rate or a full day rate, depending on what you're after. So say, for example, you want to get a pet sitter in because you're going to go out for a night with a partner, and they'll charge you an hourly rate for the 4 hours that they're there. I also know people that will charge like a rate of, say, £60 for per day that they're there for overnights. So say, for example, you go away on a Saturday and you're coming back late on the Sunday, that's £60 per day that they're there. In that regard, because they can't do any other services, so they charge you out for the entire day as a day rate. So that's something else to consider. That's why they're considered to be a more expensive option. But the pros of obviously getting a pet sitter to come to your home is that the fact that the dog is in a familiar environment with that they already know. They're not being moved to somebody else's home. They're in their own space. A pet sitter will provide individual attention and care. So pet sitters obviously are there just specifically for your dog. So they aren't going to be distracted by anybody else. They're going to get a lot of personalised attention. It reduces stress, and it can reduce stress caused by changes in surroundings. So because the dog's staying in their own home environment, there's no stress. There's little, well, I wouldn't say no stress, there's limited stress because obviously there's a person that they don't know that's there. But it's a lot easier for them than it would be if it was going to be moved somewhere else. The disadvantage of a pet sitter is obviously the main one being that they're expensive and limited spaces, and they also fill up quite quickly. So with a pet sitter, you've got to book well in advance to be able to get them to come to your home. Like I have people that I do pet sitting, and they will, as soon as they will either check with me before they book the holiday, or they will check with me a year in advance. I've got one client who will send me who literally the other day sent me a list of dates for next year to make sure I was available. But because obviously when I do pet sitting, Nala has to come with me because she's also not left to be on her own. So I only do it with my own clients. I don't do clients that I don't know. Nala knows all the dogs. Obviously if it's a dog that's not friendly, it's a little bit different in that circumstance. But generally the only dogs that aren't friendly, I've found a lot of my clients take their dogs with them. They don't leave them anywhere else. It's like I take Nala with me when we go on holiday. But yeah, if I'm pet sitting for somebody, I always double check and see if it's a dog that Nala can stay with. Home boarding facilities. Now, home boarding facilities are a great option for people who need to board their dog for an extended period of time. So home boarding you would use if you go away for a 2-week holiday or a 1-week holiday at 5 days. Like home boarding's great for that. Home boarding facilities are typically run by individuals who have experience with dogs, and they provide more home-like environment for dogs than kennels. Home boarding can be expensive than other types of dog care, but it's a great option for dogs who need a lot of attention and care. So home boarding facilities often provide a cosy and home-like environment for your dog. They're particularly ideal for dogs who don't do well with large groups. Your pet will receive a more individualised attention, and the boarding provider may have more flexibility in accommodating specific needs. However, availability may be limited and the cost can vary depending on the level of care and exclusivity. So what I'm saying with that one is what I've noticed with home boarders. You'll get ones that literally only house your dog and that's the only dog that they have. And you pay more of a premium rate for that because they're only watching your dog. They don't have it in where it's like they can have 4 or 5 dogs at once. They'll do it where it's only your dog, so your dog's getting all their attention, and might obviously include any dogs that they only have. Tends to be a lot of home boarders also are dog walkers. You do have it where home boarders will take on multiple dogs, so that's something to also consider. So it's when you're looking for a home boarder, one of the things you want to look at is how many dogs do you have at once, and is there a premium rate that I can pay if I want to have you just have mine. If that's something that you can afford. If you're happy with them being with a smaller group of dogs, that's also okay. The benefits obviously of home boarding is obviously there's fewer pets than a kennel, because a kennel houses quite a lot of dogs. There's a home-like environment, so it's not your home, but they're in somebody else's home, which I would always recommend going around and viewing beforehand. And there's an individual attention and care. So because you're staying at their home, yes, you have to take their food and anything you want them to have with them, but at the same time, there's an individual level of care there because they're only looking after your dogs. I know very few home boarders that will have more than say 4 or 5 dogs there at once, and that's including their own dogs. So I think it depends on the person in that regards. The disadvantage obviously of using home boarders is it relies very heavily on the reputation of the host. So if you've got someone who home boards, it tends to be, I know a great woman who does it. She switched from being a dog walker to a home boarder, but she specialises specifically in a certain breed. And she has 3 greyhounds herself, so I think she only does it with another 2 staying at the same time. So she only has 5 at once, and she has she's an amazing woman for starters. She was really helpful with me when I first started as a dog walker. And she still is now if I need advice and I send her a message. She's always willing to help me. She's a lovely woman. And but yeah, she does home board, and so she'll only have I think 2, including her own dogs. I've never seen her with more than 5, and that's including her own dogs. I don't know if exactly, but I do know she specialises, so she only has greyhounds in that regard. But she's been working with dogs for over 30 years, I think it is. So a lot of her business comes from her reputation in that regard. So it tends to be, when I first started as a dog walker, even as a dog walker, a lot of your stuff comes from reputation. Like people look at reviews, look at how you're treating the animals, look at what people are saying about you. But home boarding, because generally they don't have a website, it's usually someone's put something on a Facebook page. Where I live, we've got our own little kind of community one, which is like the area where we live. And I see it a lot where people put it on things saying, does anyone know anyone who does home board and that might have spaces available this date? And then you see like people listing down who they use, and that's generally how I see a lot of people. And what you tend to realize with it is like a lot of people liking it, certain names, and I can usually guarantee the person who's put that statement on is looking at the name that appears the most, and that's the first one that they'll go to because that one was recommended the most first. So it relies heavily on reputation. So in that regard, because it's relying on a reputational background, and what one person might like, you might not like, you've got to bear that in mind as well, is always see if you can go around to the house, always go and see if you can see the host with their own dogs or with your dogs and see how they're interacting with them. But obviously another disadvantage of a home boarding is there is very limited space availability on their schedule. Like currently in the UK, we're in what we call the school holidays, so kids have got 6 weeks off until the first week of September, and I know people who have done home boarding who will have been booked up by January for August, because obviously everyone's off on school, and that tends to be when you go away. So a home boarding is when like you go on holiday for 2 weeks period, so it tends to be that you fill up really fast over the holidays. So you've got it's not the kind of thing that you can ask for in July and expect them to have availability in August, because the ones that are going to get recommended the most are probably going to be already filled up by that time. So unless they've got a cancellation and they've got a waiting list, it'll be really rare for you to be able to get on board with them. Same thing's probably said for kennels as well. So next topic and last one is kennels. Kennels are the more traditional option for boarding dogs. Kennels typically have large open areas where dogs can run and play. Kennels can be a great option for dogs who are not used to being around other dogs, or for dogs who need a lot of space. Kennels can be less expensive than other types of doggy daycare or any other type of like home boarding or pet sitting. It's a little bit cheaper, but they can be more stressful environment for dogs. So you've got to bear in mind like whether or not it's a good fit for your dog. Wrong. Kennels are generally more affordable and can handle multiple dogs at once. They often have established routes and protocols for pet care. However, some dogs might find the environment stressful, and individualized attention may be limited compared to other options. The thing I always find with kennels as well is that sometimes there's generally a vet on hand. Whether that be there's a vet that works with the kennels or they have access to a 24-hour vet. So if there's a problem, there tends to be a really good emergency plan in place for kennels. So the benefits, obviously, kennels or stuff like that, they've got a vet on hand. Staff availability 24/7, so your dogs are never left on their own. Regulated by animal care laws and can handle medical emergencies if necessary. So because they have a vet on hand, it's a little bit easier sometimes for them to deal with an emergency there and then than it is if you've got a home board who's got to find an emergency vet and then travel there in that aspect. However, that being said, some of the disadvantages is the fact that, for example, Nala's not used to being in a kennel. She's got a crate, which she was crate trained in, but she sleeps on a dog bed or in my bed, or that's the kind of relationship that we've got. We don't have it where she's confined to a crate to sleep. So she would find a kennel really stressful. That's not what I would do. Like, she generally, we won't go on holiday anyway, she comes with us. Us, me, by that. It's, when I say us, I tend to mean me and her. We have a holiday, which, like, we're going to the Peak District in October this year, and she's, like, obviously it's our holiday, mine and Nala's, and we're going to go out on a hiking holiday, so I always make sure I can take her with me if I'm going somewhere. But if I was going to, because of that, that's obviously how I choose my care, and that's what the next bit we're going to look into. So you've got to make sure you understand if your dog's going to be okay in a kennel, or can it adjust in a kennel. But obviously the other disadvantage of a kennel is there's an increased risk of exposed illness. Kennel cough is called kennel cough for a reason, and that's because obviously it's an airborne virus. So if one dog gets it in a kennel, there's a probability, depending on like that, other dogs within the kennel can get it, because obviously the bacteria can land on anything that particular dog's touch, whether it be blanket, toy, and if somebody's handled that in the same day, they can also get sick. So when you've got multiple dogs in a kennel, there is the potential there that obviously if one dog gets sick, other dogs can get sick as well. So another thing to be aware of when you're asking them kind of questions is, what's your protocol in regards to sickness? Do you, because a kennel has the ability to confine a dog to just one area, it might just be that they're like, well, if one dog gets sick, what we do is we quarantine them over here. And if they have a protocol in place already, that's a really good sign for a kennel, because like there's always the chance that that might happen and whatnot. So that's not to say it's happened before and this is what they've done. It's always great to have a plan in place, because obviously kennels are aware of the fact that obviously dogs are going to get sick. Like, dogs are going to have potential issues with each other as well. So you've got the risk of obviously a potential problem with another dog. So when you're going to view a kennel, that's things you've got to consider in that regard. Is like, what's your plan if you've got dogs that don't get along? What's your plan if one of the dogs gets sick? What's your plan in the case of emergency? If I'm in a different country, are you still going to contact me before you do anything? These are things that you need to consider in regards to not just kennels, and some of the like if you've got a home board and they've got multiple dogs there as well, that's also things to consider. What do they do if one of the dogs gets sick? Because if you're a home boarding situation, they might not have the capability to quarantine a dog to a specific area of the house. So that's something else you need to consider when looking into that one. So another thing to remember is obviously every dog is unique. So it's crucial that you consider your dog's personality, their behavior, and their specific needs when you make this choice. So nobody knows your dog better than you do in that regard. So for that reason, what you need to do is obviously you need to take in consideration like your dog's personality. Some dogs are more social than others. Some dogs need more exercise than others. The type of care your dog requires. Does it require an individual service? Or will it also benefit from being around other dogs? So would it be in a home boarding situation be okay for it? Or a kennel situation be okay? Because at the same time, what you've also got to consider when you're weighing these options up is your own budget. So dog care is expensive. It's important to choose the type of care that fits your budget as well as your dog's personality. So once you've whittled down their personality and what they could deal with, then you want to look at, right, well, what are my options now? Can I afford a home boarder? No, I can't. But can my dog adjust to a kennel? And that's the next thing that obviously you've got to say, because obviously you don't want to break the bank at the same time. But at the same time, you've got to be mindful of what you can afford and what's best for your dog at the same time. So you're trying to make sure that it's affordable for you, but they're in their best situation. And then the next thing you've got to consider is your schedule. So if you have a busy schedule, you'll need to consider a type of daycare or pet dog walker or pet sitter that can accommodate your needs. So for example, I know dog walkers that only work 9 till 3. I work 9 till 5. And there's times in summer where I start at 7:30 due to the heat, because obviously I won't walk them during peak times, especially depending on how high it gets. But definitely not between 11 and 3. So there's times where I might start early, have a huge gap, and then start later, depending on what time the dog's needs. So you've also got to be mindful of the fact of, does that fit in with what you require at the same time? But also be mindful that the dog walker or pet sitter or whatever you're using has got to be flexible. So if you're looking at a dog walker, they have to be flexible with what you need, but you also need to be flexible. I can't count the amount of times where I go to a consultation with a potential client and I'm talking to them about obviously what I do, and then I'll say to them, right, so what time roughly are you thinking? And I'll go, it needs to be around lunchtime. Everybody wants around lunchtime, and the next comment they always say is, it'll break up their day nicely because it's right in the middle. Yeah, it's right in the middle for everybody, because if everyone walks 9 to 5, everyone wants 12 o'clock. So then what I try and do with my clients and anyone that comes on board with me is I always say to them, right, well, when's the first, what time does the last person leave and what time does the first person come back? Like, is there a window of where I'm okay? Because there is no way I can get to everybody at 12 o'clock. If everyone wants 12 o'clock, I can't do it. So I always try and give myself like a 2-hour window of where it's okay to be for that. Like I've got puppies that obviously I can't get to, and there's no way I'd go at them after 1 o'clock. But then I've got older dogs that are fine for me to walk them at 1 o'clock. So you've also got to understand that obviously if you require a certain kind of service, that person hasn't just got you as a client, so you need to be flexible with your schedule as well as them being flexible. If they're going to say to you, you turn around and say to them, well, I need 12 o'clock, and they go, I can't do 12, but I can do any time between 12:30 and 2 o'clock, and you're like, no, it has to be 12, then the likelihood is that they're going to say no to you, because they've got no wiggle room at all to try and fit you in. And you've got to allow for the fact that they've got to get from one client to you, and if they get stuck in traffic, that might cause an issue if you think to them that they don't get there on time. So try and be accommodating as best as you can if you're looking at them kind of services where you need a set schedule. Especially, for example, if you've got a daycare and you're saying to them you're taking your dog to a daycare and you're asking for downtime, and you say, well, they need to have a nap at lunchtime. It's like, well, we try and do where everybody has a nap at the same time, and it's usually between 1 and 2. And you're like, no, my dog has to have it at 12. Like, they've got, say, 10 other dogs there. There's no way they're going to give one dog a nap and then have it awake when all the other dogs are also asleep. So you've got to be flexible on what your expectations are. They can't just confirm to what you want. They've got to kind of put everything into consideration when they're thinking of whether or not they want you as a potential client as well. And then the next thing you've got to consider when you're looking for your services is your location. So if you live in a rural area, you might not have access to some of these options. Whereas if you live in the city, you might have more options available to you. So I would say I live quite rural. We're surrounded by quite a lot of farmland and forestry. I know people that do dog walking. I know home boarders. I know pet sitters. I don't know a dog kennel actually in the area. Pet sitters, home boarders, dog walkers, doggy daycares we've got in this area. I'm not aware of kennels, but that's probably more a case of I don't use kennels, so I don't need to know where they are in that sense as well. But the likelihood is with a kennel, you're going to have to travel to it if you live in a rural area as well. There's not going to be a kennel nearby you. It tends to be they have quite a lot of farmland, or they've got land where they can roam free a little bit. I know when I went to Nala, had a daycare, and one of them was a woman that owned her own farm. It wasn't a working farm. She'd bought a farm. She turned it into a daycare, but she did pickups and drop offs. So she picked Nala up. The same when I moved from that daycare to another daycare. She did pickups and drop-offs as well, but she was in the next town over, so it wasn't near me. It was I think it was when I drove there, I'm pretty sure it was a 20-minute drive away, which to me didn't seem too bad. And I think a lot of certain ones, so such as daycare, a lot of them do offer pick-up and drop-off times. They'll say, well, we usually try and aim at pick everybody up between 9 and 5:30, and then we drop off between 4:30 and 5, depending on what obviously the availability is. So that's a thing to consider is, depending on where you live, depends on what services you have. If you live really, really rural, you're a farmer and there's nothing around for miles, you're going to be really limited to what you can get, and you are going to have to travel to find it, or you are going to have to pay extra for someone to travel to you to do it. So that's things that you need to be considering. And then obviously key considerations, I've got a list here of about 10, I think it is, of what you need to consider when you're researching your pet care. So when researching your pet care services, you've got to keep the following things in mind. So what services are offered and what are associated with the costs. So is pick up and drop off time associated with that cost, or is there an additional charge for that? Is the service provider licensed and insured? So for example, with that one, as a dog walker, you don't actually need a license in the UK. You do need insurance. Everyone who's a dog walker should have insurance. They should also show it to you at a consultation. Don't be worried about asking for it. I would say I always carry it with me in a consultation. I have a little a pack that I take with me, and I'll have a copy of my insurance in there, a copy of my DBS check. So a DBS check is a background check in the UK that you can have done, and it's not it's dated when it was done, but there's no date of when it runs out. It tends to be a lot of people will renew it within every 3 to 5 years themselves, because obviously as a self-employed person, we've got to pay for it. So it tends to be you're given a lot of people will use one for 3 to 5 years, and then they'll get a new one on that sense. So you do have to have insurance as a dog walker. And as a pet sitter, but you don't have to have a license. You do have to have a license to be a home boarder, have a kennel, or have a doggy daycare. So they're things to consider. Again, what qualification or training does you or your staff have? So personally, as a dog walker, I did do training before I became a dog walker. I also shadowed another dog walker to see if it was the career choice that I wanted to switch to beforehand. But I'd done some courses online for dog psychology, reactive dogs, canine body language course, so I could understand the signs of when a dog was uncomfortable. And I've obviously done a certification in dog training. So now I offer dog training services. And I'm also training to be a behaviourist, but that's like a degree, so that's going to be like a 3-year process. But if anyone asks me, I'm more than happy to show them any certificates that I have if that's what they want to see. But again, as a dog walker, you don't actually need any qualifications to do the job. Same thing with a home board, and I don't imagine you need any qualifications to do that. But if you have to have a license, I imagine the council would expect you to have, at the bare minimum, a level 3 qualification in animal care, which again is something else that I've also got in that regard. So it's like, does your staff have a level 3 in animal care? So that's something that you need to consider, whether it be called a level 3 or a diploma. They're usually run about the same thing. It's a college course that you can do for 2 years. So that's something else that you can consider, is like what qualifications to have. Again, how many dogs are cared for simultaneously in the group? So for a dog walker, how big is the group? Pet sitters, how many dogs do you have sitting with, like, do you sit at the same time? Or home boarders, same thing. Kennels, obviously, it's usually given there's going to be multiple dogs there. Doggy daycares, again, how many dogs are in every day is a group, or how many do you allow? Because it could be that they say, well, we hold up to a capacity, we can hold a capacity of say 15, but then that's different to, but we don't actually accept any more dogs than 10 a day. So having a capacity to hold a certain amount of dogs is not the same as how many they actually have in there. So you've got to make sure they distinguish between the two. What are the operating hours and drop off or pick up times? So that's more like if you're looking at home boarding, pet sitting. So pet sitting, like if you're paying someone by the hour, it's like from when they get there to when they leave. If they're staying over a weekend, when you want them to start and finish. Kennels and home boarding, I imagine, can be quite strict, that you've got to drop your dog off between this window and you've got to pick it up between this window. What I would also want to know is there a penalty if you're late at a kennel or a home boarding? So by that, what you're wanting to look at is, say for example, you have gone abroad and your flight's held up, and now you're 2 hours late for picking up your dog from the boarding. Like, are you going to have to pay for another day, or are you going to have to pay a set rate for every hour that you're late? Can the service accommodate any specific needs or medical requirements that your pet may have? So for example, as a dog walker, I have a couple of clients that require me to give their dog medication at lunchtime after their walk or before their walk. So is your dog walker comfortable giving medication? Is the person looking after your pet comfortable to give them their medication? Like, are they able to give it to them at specific times? Like, if you need your dog to have their medication at, say, 8, 12 and 4, can they accommodate that? That's what you need. Because what you need to bear in mind is if your dog has to have their medication at set times and they're not willing to budge, then obviously you need to be looking somewhere else. Because if there's a time constraint on when they have to have it, and that can't be budged and moved by half an hour or an hour or whatever, then obviously you need to be looking for a different service provider in that case. Do they require vaccinations of all pets in their care? So with this one, you're looking at someone who does like doggy daycare, home boarding and kennels. They'll want to make sure that they're up to date with their vaccinations. Dog walkers, if they're walking in a group, would also need to check that, I would imagine. I walk my dogs on a one-to-one basis, so they're not mixing with other dogs at that particular thing. But I do know all my dogs are up to date with their it is on the questions on my contract when they sign up, are they up to date with the vaccinations? So it tends to be that a lot of my clients tell me when they're due anyway, in that regard, so it's quite nice. But yeah, there's also with that one as well, it's like, home boarding and kennels, I imagine, might have a requirement, same with doggy daycare, in regards to neutering, whether that be they'll only accept male dogs that are neutered or female dogs if they're neutered. So that's something that you also would need to check. How do they handle emergencies or medical issues? Like, do they have a plan for an emergency? If not, why not? Like, because I can guarantee, like, touch wood, this never happens, but I can guarantee, if I was to leave Nala somewhere, something would go wrong. If they didn't have a plan B, I would be fuming. Because if they didn't have a plan for an emergency, that puts your dog's life at risk. how quickly they respond can impact what happens to your dog in that moment. So make sure they have an emergency situation. As a dog walker, on my contract, it always states obviously your contact information, and then it'll say emergency contact information. And then not only do I have that information on hand on my phone, but I also have that information on a Rolodex in my office. So, but obviously if emergency happens, I'm going to be with the dog, hence why it's on my phone in a locked folder. That way I can get it, I can contact their vet, I can contact who their emergency contact is, and I can respond really quickly. That's the whole point of an emergency. Touch wood, never needed to do anything in emergency, but if emergency does arise, I've got all that information at hand straight away. And then can they provide references or testimonials from satisfied customers? Now with this one, what I find, doggy daycares, dog walkers and kennels, they'll always have a Facebook page. Home boarders occasionally do. The woman that I know that does home board, and she does have a Facebook page. And then she does put up testimonials. Facebook allows for reviews. Like if you have a Google business page, it'll also allow for reviews. But what I would also say is don't hold it against them if there's not many on there. Because what you've also got to consider is where their customers have come from. So for example, I've got a Google review. I've got a couple of reviews on Facebook. And then what I always do is screenshot them and put them through on my Instagram, because I get a lot of my customers from Instagram, not from Facebook or Google. So people have seen my Instagram page is what they've seen, but Instagram doesn't allow for reviews. So it's a little bit weird in that sense. And it doesn't, like, just because someone's got lots of reviews doesn't also necessarily mean that the person who hasn't got very many isn't very good. Like, for example, they might not have a very big clientele. I offer a one-to-one service. I've got 15 customers. I've got, I think, 5 reviews on one page and a couple on another one, and then one on an app that I used. And that's, but at the same time, I don't badger my customers for reviews because I don't feel I need to. And I don't want to have that kind of, yes, it's good for my business. And occasionally when a testimonial comes up, someone will remember, oh, I've not given you a review, I'll do it now. But some of them don't know. Like, who've got a mature client that has found you via, say, a referral from somebody else. I've had it where I've got a client and she got my number because she sees me walking a neighbour's dog. She's not going to give me a review because she doesn't know how to use it online. She got me via a referral. So you've also got to bear that in mind. So in that sense, ask if there's any chance that you can get testimonials from clients. Like, I've got it where I've got clients who have written me a reference if I need it. And some people do that still. Some people do you want me to give you a written reference? And that, but then at the same time, I always see all my clients at the same time on Facebook. If anyone puts anything in the local chat and they're recommending me. So at the same time, it's how they run their business. Do they ask for lots of reviews? If they're there, obviously take them with a little bit of pinch of salt. But like, if you know somebody who has that person, you're probably better off asking that person what they think as well. So bear that in mind. How do they ensure the safety and security of your pets in their care? So that one's like key towards daycares, kennels, home boarders. So how do they ensure that the dog doesn't get out? Same thing, maybe even dog walkers actually. If you've got a large amount of number of dogs and they're all staying in the car, how do they keep them in the car all at once? If they're taking them out for group walks, like, are they securely fitted in? Are they kept in crates while they're in there? Because I only do one-on-one walks, obviously I don't have that problem. I tend to have one dog in the back. Occasionally I have them in the boot, depends on like what they're used to with their owners as well. And then red flags to look out for. So red flags, you're looking for lack of like proper insurance and licenses, negative reviews of complaints. That one though, what I would say is look to see if they responded. Or if it's still someone you want to consider, ask them. Just say what exactly happened with that one. Because, for example, it could be someone that's not happy and they give them there's always 2 sides to the story and the truth is somewhere in the middle. That's what my granddad used to always say to me. And I always remember it with it where I had it with a client and she we parted ways because she didn't like the fact that I asked her to see, like, told that her vet, she needed to take her dog to the vet. And she took her dog to the vet, but she didn't show them the video that I'd shown her, and she showed them something completely different because she was convinced it was this issue. And when I said to her, is there any chance she'd go for a second opinion because he's still doing the same problem, I'm really concerned he's going to bite me, she wasn't happy. And so with that one, because she wasn't happy, she'd obviously, I got a backup about it, and she spoke to a couple of different people about it. And I just remember the woman that owns the doggy daycare, who used to be a dog walker, I'd asked her advice, and she was like, at the end of the day, if she's not willing to take her dog to the vet when you're asking her to because you're concerned about the level of pain he's in, that's not the kind of customer that you want in that regard, because like she's not looking out for the care of the dog. And technically, it's in the UK, we have the Animal Welfare Act, and there's five parts to that act, and one of them is obviously to prevent your dog from being in any unnecessary pain, and she's not applying to that rule and seeking medical attention to her dog. And instead of like taking where I'm saying to her, this is where, anytime I touch it, this is where he's going for me for, and I show her on a video exactly that situation, and instead what she does is take her dog to a vet and say, no, she thinks it's this, yet she's got video evidence of me showing her exactly where I touch and the dog is responding negatively, and she's not doing anything about it. That can be repercussions as well for me. And in that regard, I'm sure if I'd said to any one of my clients afterwards, and if they'd asked, because I'd spoken to her when she was local, I'd asked me about that, and I said to her, well, we parted way because she wasn't happy with me asking her to seek a second opinion from a vet, because I didn't believe what it was that particular problem, because where he was saying the issue was, it wasn't in the same location as where I was having an issue. Wherever the harness touched that particular part of the dog, that's when he was lashing out, not where the vet seemed to think the issue was. So I asked for her to go to a second opinion, and she wasn't willing to do that. And a lot of my clients were like, oh my God, if you told me to take my dog to the vet, I'd take it to the vet. And they like the fact that I'm not concerned about their dogs. I've had it where I've sent a message to a client and I was like, oh my God, I found this black pit on your dog. I can't get it off. It's not a tick. Don't know what it is. I think you need to take him to a vet. Turned out what she'd done was she'd bathed the dog at the weekend and groomed him. And so now, because she'd cut the fur slightly further back, I could see it. And it was a skin tag. And she goes, that's why it can't be removed. In that sense, she goes, well, thank you for checking. She goes, well, all we'd done was bath him and cut his fur a little bit, and now you can see it where before you couldn't see it. And I was like, so worried, I knew I hadn't seen it before. I was checking my pictures that I'd taken of him the week prior. I was like, this has not appeared before. So at the same time, I've had it where that's happened, or I've had it even when a client said to me, he wasn't too good with us last night, can you let us know how he is with you? And then I've sent videos and go, no, he's been a bit off with me. And then they've taken their dog into the vet the next day, because it's like, if he's off with me and he's off with them, and they know that he sees me 4 times a week, then they're also concerned about that as well. So that can be something to do. Another red flag is obviously unqualified or inexperienced staff. Overcrowded facilities. So again, you're looking at daycares, home boarding, and kennels for that particular one. Like, is it overcrowded? If it's overcrowded with too many pets, you want to look at the dog to person ratio. So if they've got, say, 6 dogs to 1 person, that to me is too many people, like too many dogs to 1 person to handle. So that to me would be a little bit overcrowded in that aspect. So do you want to leave your dog in the care of someone that has to also control 5 of the dogs plus yourself, your dog? So overcrowding can be a problem, and it can also lead out to dogs lashing out at the same time. Inadequate supervision or lack of 24-hour care. That's kennels, for example. Like, if they don't have 24-hour care, it's a kennels, like people working nights and during the day. Like, why aren't people working at night? That's a question you'd need to ask. Inflexible policies or refusal to accommodate specific needs. So as I've said before, if you've got a dog who requires medication at a set time and they're not willing to give them at that set time and go, well, we can give it to when we've got a chance, but that's all I can promise you, then that's a red flag. You shouldn't be leaving your dog there. If they can't be flexible to give your dog when they need that medication, then that's not somebody I will be leaving my dog with. No clear emergency plan or protocol. So someone that doesn't know what they're supposed to do in an emergency is not someone, again, that I would leave my dog with. Unresponsive or unprofessional communication. Now, this one I feel is a bit use your own judgment in that regard. I'm an overly friendly person. Well, I say overly friendly. I'm naturally friendly and bubbly. And I get a lot of people that say to me, oh my God, you text the same way that you speak. And I can, like, with messages, it's probably also got spelling mistakes in there with being dyslexic. But I get a lot of people, when I'm texting them, they'll say, you text exactly how you speak. And that's just the way I am. But, like, if you're a client of mine, until I've built a relationship with you, the texts are probably going to be very kind of like, this happened today, I thought I should let you know. And that, but then I've got clients that I can laugh and joke with. So, for example, there's a dog that I walk called Stanley, and like, oh, he cracks me up whenever you walk. Bless him. He's reactive with other dogs once he was attacked. But there's times where I'll send like little videos that I've made, and I'll send them to his mum just because I know she gets a kick out of it. And then there's clients where they don't want me to check up on them, tell them anything unless there's an emergency, and that's what I do. So, like, in my response, depending on the relationship I already have with that person, would depend on how I'm communicating with you. But at the same time, if someone sent me an inquiry, a lot of my social media automatically will hit back a response that'll say, thank you for getting in touch, we'll be back to you as soon as possible. And that usually gives you a time frame of how long it takes me to respond. 9 times out of 10, if you're trying to catch me during working time, I don't get a good enough signal in the forests that I'm walking around, or the national reserve places that I'm walking around, to be able to get your actual response. So I won't see it until I get home in that regard. But I have a set time where I'll check all my social medias on a night. So it tends to be I do all my responses then. But once I'm on my social media and I'm responding to you, you'll get an instant response. If I send you a message and you reply back straight away, you'll get another reply back in that regard. So you've got it. But if at the same time, if you've got somebody you sent a response to and they never reply back, or they're really inadequate in their replies, that's probably a red flag. Like, especially if you've got, like, I'm a stickler for timing, like, and I hate being late for anything. So on a Sunday, I always send out texts confirming dates for the following week to my clients. And I've got friends that I can arrange plans with, and I'll text them on the morning, I'm making sure you're up, because I'm up, but I'm making sure you're up, kind of thing. And that's with friends. But if you've got a dog booked in with me for something and it's your first time, I will confirm with you on the Sunday. I will confirm with you the night before. And if you're leaving me a key or something like that, I will confirm the day of you've left me a key, because I want to touch base and make sure that we're all on the same page. But at the same time, I will probably also tell you that I'm doing that. So I can guarantee that, I've, for example, I got a new client whose teeth I was cleaning, and I'll text her the day off and I'll say, I'm just confirming that I'm coming tomorrow. And she's like, yeah, not a problem. It's 10 o'clock, isn't it? It's like, yeah, it's 10 o'clock. And then I'll text her the day off going, right, I'm setting off. My sat nav says it's going to take me 30 minutes to get there. I shall see you in 30 minutes. And I just like people to know that obviously I'm arriving and it's not any different, especially when I'm traveling, because I'm going to get hold of in traffic. Then at least I'm aware of it, because if the sat nav then says there's been a car accident and I have a detour, I can notify that person. And that's what I do. But not everyone's like that. So you've got to kind of gauge them responses for yourselves. So what do you consider to be unprofessional behaviour? And what do you consider to be unresponsive? Like, it's fair dues giving someone maybe a day or two to reply, but if you give them a week, like, and you've got something that you're planning on, that's a little bit too, like, that's too long for me. You shouldn't be waiting that long in that sense. So I can understand if after a week of not replying to somebody, if they turn around and say to me, look, I found somebody else, I'd be completely understandable with that, because I've waited a week. At the same time, though, if I've sent you a message and the message comes back and it says, I'm currently on annual leave and I can't respond until this date, then at the same time, you've got to wait until that date. And if you don't hear anything back within 24 hours of that particular day, then I'd move on, because you've already had to wait for that response, and then you've waited extra time. But even when I'm on holiday, to be fair, I still reply to messages. I just find it really rude, if I'm honest. But that's a personal preference. That's me. And if I don't respond there and then I forget, I've got a memory like a sieve. And I do that with friends. Like I'll literally reply straight away, because if I don't reply, they will literally have to send me a text a couple of hours later going, "You've not replied to my message, is everything okay?" Because I haven't replied, because I've got a memory like a sieve. So, but yeah, so choosing the right dog care for your furry friend can be a daunting task. Like I've done this in the past with Nala. Don't feel bad, or don't let anyone make you feel bad if you're interviewing people. I interviewed dog walkers for Nala. I interviewed the daycares that Nala went to. My friend thought it was weird. I was like, well, you interview nurseries, don't you? Like, I'm leaving my prized possession in somebody else's care. You're guaranteed I'm going to be interviewing them, making sure it's a suitable environment for her. So, it's one of them things. Don't let anyone make you feel bad if you're wanting to do thorough research. But it is also really daunting, because you're trying to find the best fit for you. And that's the key thing that you've got to remember. It's not just anyone will do. It's the one that's the best fit for you and your dog. And that. So it's important to do that research. It's important to choose a type of care that's right for you and your dog. By considering your dog's personality, your budget, your schedule, and your location, you can find the perfect dog care for you and your dog. So, like what I said near the beginning, what I have done is I'll put a link in the description that'll take you to the blog post where all this information is already on there as well. At the bottom of the page, you will see a PDF that you can print that has all the kind of questions that you can ask for any of these kind of services. Like, print it as you would do anything. And the last thing is, before we say goodbye, dear listeners and viewers, if you're watching on YouTube, we have a small favour to ask. So if you're enjoying the insightful content and tangents of information, and that we bring you here at Nala's Tales podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're tuning in via your favourite podcast platform, we'll be thrilled if you can leave us a little love. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and click subscribe icon. By subscribing, you'll be able to see updates on when we release our next episodes and any shorts that I do. I started doing shorts on YouTube, so you'll be able to get notifications when you see them as well. And as for podcast listeners, we can kindly ask you to follow or subscribe on them chosen platforms. You're able to do that, I think, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcast. I know for definite, because I use Google and I use Spotify. I also use Amazon Music, and you can follow on Amazon Music as well. So hit the follow and subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. And it also lets the algorithm know that we're actually reaching people. And if you don't mind, it'll be lovely and helpful if you can also leave a 5-star review. It would mean the world to both me and Nala. We do read them. Not only does it warm our pet-loving hearts, but it also helps put our podcast higher in the search rankings, making it easier for fellow dog enthusiasts to find us. On a last but not means least, don't forget to spread the word. If you know a friend or a family member or a fellow dog lover who could benefit from discussions, please share our podcast or our YouTube channel with them. Your recommendation goes a long way in helping us reach a wider audience and creating community of passionate pet owners. I have a friend who always says to me, he sees my stuff and he forgets to share it or like it. And he's like, and what's bad is I know that if I like it, I know it reaches other people. And I was like, well, you're not really helping me then, yeah. If you're listening to this, Dave, that is directed at you. But I love you really, bless you. And yeah, but thank you for being part of Nala's Tales family. Together we're making the world a better place for our furry companions, one episode at a time. But until next time, remember to give your pups and dogs an extra belly rub from us, and also stay positive.